Chapter 3. All nations shall flow unto it. In almost all the narratives produced by the proto-Zionist and even Zionist historians, conversion is mentioned as one reason for the vast presence of Jewish believers throughout the ancient world before the fall of the Second Temple. 47, but this decisive factor was sidelined, as we have seen, while the more dramatic players of Jewish history dominated the field: expulsion, displacement, emigration and natural increase. These gave a more appropriate ethnic quality to the dispersion of the Jewish people. Dubnoff and Barron did make greater allowance for conversion, but the stronger Zionist writings played it down, and in the popular historical works, above all in the textbooks, which shaped public consciousness, it all but vanished from the picture. It is generally assumed that Judaism has never been a missionizing religion, and if some proselytes joined it, they were accepted by the Jewish people with extreme reluctance. Proselytes are an affliction to Israel. The famous pronouncement in the Talmud is invoked to halt any attempted discussion of the subject. When was this statement written? Did it in any way reflect the principles of the faith and the forms of Jewish experience in the long period between the Maccabee revolt in the 2nd century BCE and the Bar Kokhba uprising in the 2nd century CE? That was the historical period in which the number of Jewish believers in the Mediterranean cultural world reached a level that would again be matched only in the early modern age. The period between Ezra in the 5th century BCE and the revolt of the Maccabees in the 2nd was a kind of dark age in the history of the Jews. Zionist historians rely on the biblical narrative for the time leading up to that period, and on the books of the Maccabees and the final part of Josephus's Antiquities of the Jews for the end of it. Information about that obscure period is very sparse. There are the few archaeological finds, the abstract biblical texts, which may reflect the time at which they were written, and Josephus's short narrative. The Judean society must have been quite small then, and when the inquisitive Herodotus passed through the country in the 440s BCE he missed it altogether. What we do know is that, while the abundant biblical texts during this Persian period promoted the tribal principle of an exclusive sacred seed, other authors wrote works that ran counter to the hegemonic discourse, and some of those works entered the canon. The second Isaiah, the Book of Ruth, the Book of Jonah and the apocryphal Book of Judith all call for Judaism to accept Gentiles, and even for the whole world to adopt the religion of Moses. Some of the authors of the Book of Isaiah proposed a universalist telos for Judaic monotheism. And it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, Come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, and he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. Isaiah 2:2-3. Ruth the Moabite, great-grandmother of King David, follows Boaz and marries him without any problem. Similarly, in the Book of Judith, Achior the Ammonite, influenced by Judith, converts to Judaism. Yet both of them belonged to peoples that Deuteronomy strictly prohibited. An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord forever. Deuteronomy 23:3. The creators of these proselytized characters depicted them to protest against the overweening isolationism of Ezra and Nehemiah's priests, those authorized agents of the Persian kingdom. Every monotheism contains a potential element of mission. Unlike the tolerant polytheisms, which accept the existence of other deities, the very belief in the existence of a single God and the negation of plurality impels the believers to spread the idea of divine singularity that they have adopted. The acceptance by others of the worship of the single God proves his might and his unlimited power over the world. Despite the isolationist caste tendency implanted in the Jewish religion in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, which would return in response to the harsh strictures of the triumphant Christian Church, it was not as exceptional in propagating monotheism as many think. Heterodox voices in the Old Testament calling on the Gentiles to acknowledge Yahweh are found not only in Isaiah but also in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Zephaniah, Zechariah and the Book of Psalms. Jeremiah advises the Babylonian exiles in Aramaic, "Thus shall ye say unto them, the gods that have not made the heavens and the earth, even they shall perish from the earth, and from under these heavens." Jeremiah 10:11. Them presumably refers to the Gentiles, and the message is given in their language. In Ezekiel, God says, "Thus will I magnify myself, and sanctify myself, and I will be known in the eyes of many nations, and they shall know that I am the Lord." Ezekiel 38:23. The last days are described thus in Zephaniah, "For then will I turn to the people a pure language, that they may all call upon the name of the Lord, to serve him with one consent." Zephaniah 3-9. Zechariah says, "Yea, many people and strong nations shall come to seek the Lord of hosts in Jerusalem, and to pray before the Lord. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, in those days it shall come to pass, that 10 men shall take hold out of all languages of the nations, even shall take hold of the skirt of him that is a Jew, saying, We will go with you, for we have heard that God is with you." Zechariah 8:22-3. The author of the Book of Psalms sings ecstatically, "Oh, clap your hands, all ye people, shout unto God with the voice of triumph. For the Lord Most High is terrible, he is a great king over all the earth." Psalms 47:1-2, "And oh bless our God, ye people, and make the voice of his praise to be heard." Psalms 66-8, "And declare his glory among the heathen, his wonders among all people." Psalms 96-3. Numerous other verses express the preaching, exhortatory side of the first Jewish monotheism that addressed the Gentiles. The Old Testament, having been written by many authors and then edited and re-edited by others over many years, is full of contradictions. For every expression of contempt, rejection or superiority over the Gentiles, there is also sermonizing, sometimes subtle and sometimes explicit. The severe book of Deuteronomy, for instance, instructs very firmly, "Neither shalt thou make marriages with them, thy daughter thou shalt not give unto his son, nor his daughter shalt thou take unto your son. For thou art a holy people unto the Lord thy God, the Lord thy God hath chosen thee to be a special people unto himself, above all people that are upon the face of the earth." Deuteronomy 7-3, 6. Yet the heroes of biblical mythology ignored these divine prohibitions. Abraham, Isaac, Joseph, Moses, David and Solomon are all shown as lovers of Gentile women who never bothered to convert their chosen spouses. Abraham lived happily with Hagar, until forced by Sarah to send her away. Joseph took the Egyptian Asenath to wife, David married a princess of Geshur, and Solomon, the great lover, had no qualms about taking Edomite, Sidonite, Ammonite and Moabite women, among others. When these stories were written, whether during the Persian or Hellenistic period, a child's religious and communal identity was not determined by the mother, and evidently the anonymous authors were unperturbed by this issue. The oldest extra-biblical evidence of people having adopted the Jewish religion, or aspects of it, is found in documents from the Sumerian city of Nippur, dating from the Persian period. In these documents, quite a few of the paternal names are typically Babylonian, whereas their children's names are typically Hebrew. While it is true that many Jews had non-Hebrew names, Zerubbabel son of Shealtiel and Mordecai the Jew are among the best known, the tendency to give Hebrew names to the children of Judaist converts was not a passing fad, and could be an indication of conversion at a fairly early stage. There are similar examples in the Elephantine papyri, where the parents bear Egyptian names and the children's names are frequently Hebrew. Here the conversion hypothesis looks stronger, but Judean emigrants did not have Egyptian names. In those documents there are also cases of adults taking Hebrew names, and of marriage with Gentile men and women, who join the expanding community. The religion practiced by the inhabitants of Elephantine was not purely monotheistic, and they did not know the Bible. It is reasonable to assume that the community of Jewish believers in the province of Yehud, which included the region around Jerusalem, also increased in spite of Ezra and Nehemiah's strict isolationist policy. It is not known when the biblical Book of Esther was composed. Some assume that it was first written in the late Persian period, and finally redacted in the Hellenistic. It is also possible that it was composed after the conquests of Alexander the Great. Toward the end of the story, after the triumph of Mordecai and Esther over Haman the Agagite in faraway Persia, it says, "And many of the people of the land became Jews, for the fear of the Jews fell upon them." Esther 8:17. This is the only mention in the Bible of conversion to Judaism, and this statement about mass conversions, not at the end of days but in the present, indicates the strengthening confidence of the young Jewish monotheism. It may also hint at the source of the great increase in the number of Jewish believers in that period. A 1965 doctoral thesis by Uriel Rapaport, unfortunately not published, though its author became a well-known historian of the Second Temple period, deviated from the usual historiographic discourse and sought, without success, to draw researchers' attention to the widespread wave of conversions. Unlike all the ethno-nationalist historians, Rapaport did not hesitate to conclude his brilliant thesis with this statement: given its great scale, the expansion of Judaism in the ancient world cannot be accounted for by natural increase, by migration from the homeland, or any other explanation that does not include outsiders joining it. As he saw it, the reason for the great Jewish increase was mass conversion. This process was driven by a policy of proselytizing and dynamic religious propaganda, which achieved decisive results amid the weakening of the pagan worldview. In this, Rapaport joined a non-Jewish historiographic tradition that included the great scholars of ancient history, from Ernest Renan and Julius Wellhausen to Eduard Meyer and Emil Scheurer, and asserted, to use the sharp words of Theodore Mommsen, that ancient Judaism was not exclusive at all, it was, rather, as keen to propagate itself as Christianity and Islam would be in future. If propagating the faith began in the late Persian period, under the Hasmoneans it became the official policy. It was the Hasmoneans who truly produced a large number of Jews and a great people.